Good morning! I'm very excited because today we're going to do a door opening, and there's two ways to open a door. You can do sliding doors, you can do rotating doors, but this is very similar to what we did in our motion tutorials, except there's logic now involved, needing to know when a door is open, how long it should stay open, and when it needs to close. So that's what we're going to be working on today. Got roughly half an hour, so let's see how far we can get. And yes, I did feel bad for messing, like always being in front of Link, so I moved him. All right, so here we are in our world, and I was thinking it would be kind of nice if when you walked into the world, there was a door you had to walk through, kind of give some space, break the space into pieces. So we'll just simply pull out a shape, and now you could build a door in Blender and bring it in. And when you bring in a model, you'll remember there's that preserve offset pivots. That would be necessary when you're bringing in a door to make it so that it's pivoting on its correct axis. But since we don't have that ability, we're just going to fake build a door. So make it tall, make it skinny, start to look like a door. Fantastic. Maybe a little bit wider. Very nice. Slide that over roughly to there. And we can change the coordinate to be exactly 0, exactly 1, exactly -8, so that way it's nicely aligned with one of our lines there. We can then change our scale to be exactly 1. That's kind of skinny, but 1.25. There we go. That's a number I can be okay with. Let's go with 2 on the height, and sure, 0.15 on the width. Nice. So we've got this door, and you can choose whichever axis you want this to rotate around. And there's so many different types of doors, so maybe we should start with the sliding door. We'll leave this one here for our rotating door, and I can manually set that to 6. Very nice. Oh, that was -6, my bad. So we'll have this one be our rotating door. This will be our sliding door example. And for a sliding door, it's relatively simple. The way that I like to do sliding doors is you just duplicate your first door, slide this over to wherever you want it to slide to, let's say right about there with a little bit of overlap. We then turn off the visibility, and we call this sliding door open reference. So this is the reference point for it when it's open. We do want to turn off collidable as well. We can turn off that one as well. And this will just be a reference on the properties panel of our door. So we'll then call this sliding door. Now from our sliding door, we can go and attach this script, new script, call it sliding door underscore entity, and create and attach. Very nice. Now for our sliding door to work, we're going to start by using a trigger. So we'll go to our build gizmos, pull out a trigger gizmo, give that a second to load in. Very nice. I want to copy the position of this door, right click, copy position, right click, paste position. We can then adjust the scale. So if I just right click, copy scale, right click, paste scale, it's exactly the same. And then I can go to our scale tool and just go along that blue axis and maybe just shrink it down on the gray axis by just a hair so there's no overlap on the edges. There we go. So now we've got this. When you get that close to it, the door should slide open, which I think will work nicely. It does make me realize that this needs some more space. So what I'm going to do is grab these all and slide those back further to give us more space. Doesn't need to be exact. I was getting exact earlier, but it's just me being finicky. There we go. That should do the trick. All right, so now that we have more space for our sliding door, it's ready to go. Next thought is we need to make this all work. And you have to decide, what do you want to run the script on? We could make the sliding door the brains. We could make the trigger the brains. I think we're going to make the trigger the brains in this case. So sliding door trigger, and then we'll attach the script, new trigger script, and we'll call this sliding door trigger underscore entity, and create and attach. Now I do believe that I had just created a script on the door itself, so let's go delete that script, my bad. Remove script, and we'll go to scripts drop down, find sliding door entity, and hit delete. We just need the one for this to work. Now we have our sliding door trigger, 3 dots, open an external editor, and here we are in VS Code, and we'll make that nice, good size there. And we should be getting slightly familiar now with these trigger scripts that come out by default. So I like the way they set up the top. I don't need the entity enter trigger. We're just doing player enter trigger, so we'll delete that. We can delete the entity enter trigger method. Oops, got rid of a curly brace, so we'll fix that. We don't need the lines inside of here, and I prefer for this to be called player enter trigger, so I adjust that real quick as well. And now it is to my liking, control save. And as I mentioned in yesterday's video, we are not going to be changing this from .bind this to an arrow function because it was already pre-made. But in the case that we're writing this ourselves, we would have done the arrow function, but there's no need to change it. All right, if you want to know more about that, check out yesterday's video. I can't even remember which one it was in. There was 3 yesterday. It was one of them. So anyway, in player enter trigger, we want to slide door open. That's pretty straightforward. And we also want to have a player exit trigger where we slide the door closed. So let's Control C, Control V, and change this to player exit trigger. There we go. And coming along nicely. I am getting some lag on my VS Code. This happens from time to time, and it really annoys me. I feel like if I turn off my camera, so hi-bye, that might improve it. We'll see. All right, so we got player enter trigger, slide the door open. Yeah, no, it's still laggy. That's fine. Now we need to connect the exit trigger event. So we just Control C, Control V, change this to exit trigger. There we are. And change this one to exit trigger. Very good. And now we've got those both set up. Now, with this ready to go, there's one major thing that we are missing, which is the overtime manager. I'm a little nervous because I want to recommend you go down here to creator, you type in Vidyuu, maybe, Vidyuu for Vidyuu, and then you should be able to find the Vidyuu overtime manager. Problem is, I've had like a 50-50 shot of this not working, so we'll give it a shot. It kind of, I really hope it works. Press OK. There's the Vidyuu overtime manager. There are the 2 scripts. The overtime manager is running the overtime utility. Go to scripts, and we should see 2 scripts in here. Motion overtime, and unfortunately, it does look like this one has not worked for us because it doesn't have the other utility motion overtime _func. And I don't know that there's a way to fix this. I'm going to assume that it works. Let's try clicking recompile all scripts. Maybe there's a way to get it to appear because it's definitely in this world. I've tried copying the script into the world and it just doesn't work. Maybe let's go down here to the function file and just hit delete selection. And now that it's really not in the world theoretically, let's go recompile all scripts. So we don't see it here still. We can hit 3 dots, open scripts folder in Explorer. We can then go into the scripts folder, and then I should have a copy of this in my downloads, so we'll right-click, open a new window, and then we're looking for the overtime function. There it is, Control-C. Coming back over here, this is where it tends to go wrong. Pasting this in. The problem is it really is inside of the world on the server side, but it's not inside of the world, so it's, it's a Horizon bug. Yeah, so now it made it over 2. So I think we just need to go in and change ours to be called func2 and be good with that. That's probably the best approach for anyone trying to follow along with this. What that means is under scripts, we can go down here and we can see there's number 2, open an external editor. This is fine. There's nothing weird in here. It does have the array utilities built in, which might be part of the problem because we're missing array utils, which we have already installed in our world. Oh no, this is an older version of the file. That's what this is. This is just an older version of this. I changed the newest version, the one that actually comes out, which we would see if we went to where you could get this file from, which is from Drive. So you go to Drive, and on the Google Drive, there are TypeScript utilities. And inside of TypeScript utilities, you'll find overtime function, which you can then hit download. We should get this one too. And then we will save this here and replace the old one so that we never do that again. Press save, yes, overwrite. and then show in folder. Okay, and then we'll come over here, right click, reveal in File Explorer as well, then right click, delete, drag, oh wait, I want to copy and paste this, Control C, Control V. So you're going to have to go to, in the description, there's a link to the Vidyuu Assets on Google Drive, and then you can download that if this bug happens to you. It doesn't happen to me every single time. Then this should get renamed to 2, probably once we click into Horizon. Clicking in here, scripts, compile all scripts. Utility motion over time underscore function. I expect that to label as number 2. It didn't, which is strange. So, okie dokie. I guess we're okay if that worked. Maybe because it's exactly the same, it's not slightly different. Maybe because it's the exact same script. Not really sure, to be honest. Now, if it had to be relabeled number 2, you'll notice here this one does not have the array utilities in it, which means it's self-inclusive. It doesn't need another utility file. If we go to the utility motion over time, this was importing from the overtime function. So if this was labeled 2, you'd have to add the number 2 here. And take a deep breath. Okay, so that should be all you need to know about getting this thing working. You could just download it from the internet, both utility files, and then all you have to do is attach it to this guy, the overtime manager. So create an empty object from your build, pull out an empty object, and then attach the utility motion over time entity. That's what makes this work. And why do we go through this much work? Because motion over time is very difficult. If you haven't watched the tutorial, you should really do that. I'm kind of reorganizing these so that it's just an individual empty object and then moving this to 0, 0, 0 just to make my head happy. That's not required though. Okay. Yeah, so watch the motion over time video if you want to see how it would work in onUpdate, because this thing saves us a lot of headache. And now it's time to go back to our door opening trigger script, where we have that. Sliding door is what it's called. 3 dots, open external editor. And so we want to slide this door open. We need to know where to go. So on our properties panel, we're going to have a reference. So we're going to call this the open position reference, which will be of type prop types dot. And I had some people asking, what are all these things? So I thought we'd just pause here for a minute to talk about what are the options for the properties panel of the thing. So asset would be any asset, whether it's an image or a model from the asset library. You can use that for all sorts of things. Boolean is a true or false. Color is a color. Entity is what we're going to be using. So it's, you know, a reference to something in the world. Number is a number. Player is a player. Quaternion, string is a string. I mean, okay, quaternion is a rotation if you didn't know that. Vector 3 is a position or a vector. You can use that for whatever you want. And then there's array variants of all of these. The array is just to be backwards compatible with code blocks. And honestly, the same thing's true with player. You don't need player on the properties panel. And in most cases, you also don't need quaternion or vector 3 on the properties panel. You can just calculate that, which is what we're about to do, using an entity, and then save it locally. So there is a lot here, but the ones that you need to be mostly concerned about are asset, Boolean, color, entity, number, and string. And the rest of them, vector and quaternion, you might use, but anything above that, you're probably not going to touch. All right, so this is going to be an entity. So the open position reference is an entity, and we can put comma there. And then down below this is where we're going to store the actual positions. So we want to know the closed position, which we're going to say equals vec3.0, and then we'll set it on world start. And then we need to know the open position, which will also equal a vec3.0, Shift Alt F to pretty, and there we go. Now on start, we can set the closed position. So you can say, let's start with the open position, really. Oh no, closed position, because we're in closed position. Okay, so closed position equals this dot entity dot position dot get. There we go. And then open position is the same thing, but open position equals props dot open position reference dot position dot get. Now this one's upset because what if this isn't defined on the properties panel? Because we haven't defined it yet, that would be undefined. And it needs to be a value that is a vector. So we have to say question mark, which allows us to say if that for some reason I forgot to define it, use vec30 instead. So that's a quick way to say, oops, that's undefined. Go ahead and use vec3.0. Okay, so now that we've set this up, we can now move to the correct position. And we'll just go into our properties panel and add one more property here. And I'm going to Control-C, Control-V to make this easier to set up. This is going to be called the open time in milliseconds. It will be a prop type number. The default will be, let's go with 2000. So 2 seconds. That's too long. Let's go with 1 second. All right, Control-Save. Now, to utilize all this and actually get it to slide, we just need to write one line of code here in player to trigger, which will be overtime dot move to dot start dot or parentheses, and then the thing that we want to move is self, so we say this dot entity. The place we want to move to when the player enters the trigger is the open position, so we call open position. The duration is our props dot open time in milliseconds. And Control-C, Control-V, Alt-arrow down, and we've got one set up for our closed position. So when player exits trigger, we want to go to the closed position. We just swap that out, and we're done. There you go. That's a pretty simple door, sliding door, opening and closing. All right, let's go ahead and wait for that. Oh, right, I was not on the console. I'm like, it should be compiling. There we go. And we need to go to the trigger and reference the open position. So we have our open reference. We'll drop that in. Very nice. Now world simulation on. Oh, I'm so dumb. I forgot to reference the door because we're running on the trigger. My bad. Good catch, good catch. So on the sliding door, we need to have also, Control-C, Control-V, the door to slide. The thing that we're actually sliding is a door. And so down here, we weren't moving this because this is the trigger. We're running on the trigger, right? So we want this dot props dot door. And I'm just going to copy that, Control-C, Control-V. And now this is upset because the door might be undefined. And so we'll just say if parentheses props dot door, curly braces, Alt-arrow down. And then same thing down here, if parentheses props dot door, curly braces, Alt-arrow down, Control-Save. Okay, give that a moment to compile, and then we do need to reference that door on the trigger itself here. It looks like it's ready to be referenced, so we'll just grab the sliding door and drop that. Oh, we have 2 sliding doors, don't we? We need to make sure we get the right one. So this one here is the rotating door. And this is the sliding door. Okay, perfect. Sliding door trigger, reference, sliding door. Very nice. We are now ready to try this out. So world simulation on, go into preview mode. When we walk up, the door slides over. When we exit, the door slides closed. Not too bad, not too bad. Very cool. And so you can imagine building some art around that to make it look good. That could be a glass door, whatever you want to do. Lots of options there. Now there is one major problem, and to demonstrate that, I'm going to need one of these NPCs. So let's hit Control-D and slide this guy over here. We need to put him right above. Perfect. We're pretty close to perfect. So we'll go world simulation on, jump into preview mode, and when I walk over here, oh, we're getting some issues where I need to reset the world. All right. So when I walk into this trigger, slides over, he's on top of it. We're gonna have to try this again. Let's slide him over here, right there. Nice. Okay, so this guy's already in the trigger. So when I walk over, it does actually start the motion over time, though you can't see it. And so when I exit the trigger, it closes, even though this guy is still in the trigger. So if he was in the door, it would, like, you know, collapse on him, sort of thing. We need to track how many players are trying to go through this door. Otherwise, it's going to be constantly doing this as people are trying to go in and out of it. And it's going to be really annoying for somebody. So what we're going to do is track for multiple players. In fact, I'm going to leave that there so we can see this work next time. And to track multiple players, it's pretty simple. It used to be even simpler, but for us, we need to manually track who's inside the door, the trigger. And so we can say players in trigger, colon, is an array of players. So we say player array equals square brackets, so it's an empty array by default. And then when the player enters the trigger, and we'll just do this above this one here, we can say, you know, I'm just debating. I think we'll do it inside of this if statement so that everything is kind of determined if there is a door. So we say players in trigger dot push parentheses player. There we go. And that has now added the player to the players in trigger. And now when they exit the trigger, we need to remove them. So the way that I remove players is by doing array utilities. You can download that from the same place we saw over time. So on the description, you'll see that. We can then use remove item from array, and then parentheses passing in the players in trigger array and passing in the player. Now, that will remove the player from the trigger, but there's one other instance that we might need to remove the player. Say, for instance, a player leaves the world without exiting the trigger. In that case, we also want to close the trigger. So we're going to duplicate the onPlayerExit trigger event, Control-C, Control-V, and we are going to fire this when they exit the world. So we need a PlayerExitWorld event. PlayerExitWorld. I think it might actually be okay to just directly link this to PlayerExitTrigger. I can't see any problems occurring with that being the case. Yeah, that should totally be fine. So then, with this setup, PlayerExitTrigger will now fire when the player exits the world as well. And if they're in the array, it's going to remove them. If they're not in the array, this doesn't break. It's totally fine. It just doesn't do anything if there is no player in the array. And so now what we need to do is utilize the length of players in trigger to know when to open and when to close. So in the case of opening, we want to open if players in trigger equals 1. So you are the first player to be added to the array, because if there's somebody, because it had to have been 0 before that, right? So we'd say if players in trigger dot length triple equals 1, then we know that we need to open the door. So Alt arrow up, and now moving to is going to happen on this door over the open time. Perfect. And now that we've got this set up in players enter trigger, players exit trigger needs to kind of do the same thing. The problem is we want to do this if there is only one player in the array and they are the player being removed. Like if exiting the world's happening, it's not really going to be a problem if we're just constantly trying to close the door. But because we're calling this on exit world and people might not be in the trigger when they exit the world, if I was to write this the same way, it's always going to be equal to 0 if there's nobody in the trigger, so it's just going to be constantly trying to move, even though there's no need for it to be moving since it's already in the end position. So it definitely wouldn't be broken, you wouldn't notice anything, but it would look a lot better, or it would be more performance to check that this is the player that's been removed. So this doesn't return anything, which is fine. Let's see. I'm thinking the way to do this is we say if parentheses players in trigger dot contains dot has. What is the players in trigger dot includes? There it is. If this players in triggers includes the player, then we know that they are in the array. We can then remove them from the array, and we can then run the if statement if it equals 0. So then we say if players in trigger dot length triple equals 0, then we know we've just removed the last player from the trigger, and we can then move it back to the closed position. And so we'll demonstrate this a couple ways. I think the easiest way to do this is going to be clear, world simulation on. We get this weird bug when they first load in, so we'll then hit reset. We'll jump into preview mode, and now the door is open, and if I walk in, nothing happens. When I walk out, nothing happens. Fantastic. Now we'll go ahead and delete this, and you can see that it closes when that player left the world, and we can walk in, ta-da, and it works just as before. Fantastic. So that is the simple logic. There's a lot to it, right? Maybe calling it simple is it's a bad approach, but you can see that works pretty well. Now what we want to do next is make it so that this trigger could do rotation instead. I think that would be quite interesting. The problem is rotating needs to happen along an axis, which is what we're going to cover over here. All right, so what I'm going to do is very quickly show you how we can do this rotation one. And then I've got a couple challenges for you. So you remember yesterday's tutorial? You probably don't. But there's a tutorial on cannonballs entering this trigger. So you can, instead of using a player, use an object entering a trigger, which means you could create a keyhole on your door, and instead of opening it when the player enters the trigger, you could do it when the key enters the trigger, open the door. I would encourage you to investigate that. I think it would be really cool. You might enjoy it. There is definitely a need to close it in a different way. It is a bit of a challenge. Definitely encourage you to think about that. So you could have a locked door, you need to find a key to open the door. Now for our rotating one, we're going to start by duplicating our sliding door script, since it's pretty much the same script, just rotation. So we'll go and type reveal in File Explorer, press Control-C, Control-V. I don't really want to do that. I really honestly want to take this and say, rename this and call this door trigger, and just make this one do both sliding and rotating. I don't feel like it's that hard to change, and so I've changed enough that this doesn't exist. So now we need to go and open up the door trigger script. Here it is, and then we can right click, rename symbol. I am running out of time, unfortunately, so I'm just trying to quickly wrap up this here. So we got the door trigger entity, and we've got our door, we've got our open position reference. We're going to change this to be called open reference, since it will be also a rotation reference in the case that's rotation. We will then need to say Control-C, Control-V, and say is sliding. And if it's sliding, this would be a Boolean, and the default value is going to be true, so it's going to default to being a sliding door. We're going to move this to the top because it's really important that that is set when you're setting this up. So we've got our closed position, we've got our open position. We're also going to need closed rotation and open rotation, so we'll go ahead and copy this, Control-C, enter Control-V, create some space, Shift-Alt-F to prettify. We're going to call this rot, so it represents rotation. There we go. And then we'll change this to be a quaternion. And then quaternions zeroed out are called quaternion.1. There is a quaternion.0. I have no idea what it is, but we use quaternion.1 if we're talking about a 000 quaternion. I know, it's confusing. Quaternions have 4 values, so it's actually 0001 is what a quaternion 1 is. I don't fully understand it. I would love to. So if you understand it and want to leave a comment telling me, I would love to hear about it. But it's complicated, is my understanding. So now that we've got this set up, our open reference will need to be renamed right here. And then we also need to do this for our rotation. So Control-C, enter, Control-V, change this to be rot, change this to be rot as well, change this to be rotation.get, change this to be rotation.get. Ta-da! Open rot. Oh, this needs to be a quaternion. .1 is the value if there is nothing here. Very nice. Okay, so we've initialized our open and closed positions, and then in here when we're doing our move to, we might actually want to do a rotate to, and that would be determined based on the Boolean. So we'd say if props dot is sliding. If it's sliding, then we do a move to, else we're going to do a rotate to. And so we type same thing, overtime dot rotate to dot start, parentheses, this is applying to props dot door. This is the open rotation, and it's props dot open time milliseconds. There we go. So very, very similar. We're actually going to copy this because it's so similar, in fact, that down here we should replace it and just change it to closed position and closed rotation. So this is closed position, this is closed rotation. And like that, we are now finished with the script for our rotating door. Shift-Alt-F to make it pretty. There we go. I know I went a little fast through that, but I'd encourage you, if you're feeling stuck, to just pause and like work your way through it, because it is pretty basic logic changes, right? Like we're just adding this Boolean to say if it's sliding, do sliding. If it's not, do rotating. And then we added a couple more variables to represent the rotation positions, like the rotation values. And everything else works the same. So with that in mind, let's come over here and get this set up. This is a little bit difficult, as I mentioned. So we hit Control-D to duplicate this. And this is going to be overlapped. We're going to right-click and create a parent object so that it's a group. Then inside of this, we'll call this the rotating door. And then inside of our rotating door, this is the one that's visible, this is the one that's non-visible, and what this does is it creates a center point right in the middle. So if I click on rotating door, you can see that the center is right here, so it'll actually rotate around this axis. To do that is, you know, the easiest way to do this. You could create a model, as I mentioned in the beginning, in Blender, with this being the anchor point. And when you upload an asset to your asset folder, so I'll just quickly demonstrate that, you have this option to preserve pivots. That's when you want to use the preserving of pivots. Otherwise it centers it, which is what I usually want. I usually want it to be centered. But in the case of a door, you'd want to import it with a pivot on the edge. And this is a way to get around it if it is centered. Okay, with that little explainer, we can now duplicate our rotating door, Control-D, and then rotate this until we have it at the correct open value that we want. So we'll go to right about there. That's going to represent open. And then we'll call this the rotating door open reference. We're then going to turn off visible and collidable. And yes, this is taking up a little bit more capacity because there are 4 of these doors when there really only needs to be 1. But for the sake of just demonstrating this tutorial, we're just going to make this easier. There definitely is a way to do this better. Okay, I'll quickly show you. Basically, because we've now rotated into the correct position, we just need the rotation value, which means we can get rid of one of these doors reference values. In fact, I might be able to get rid of both of them and just keep this parent object. I'm pretty sure we can just keep the parent. So we just hit delete, and now that represents the rotation. Yeah, simple as that. There we go. Okay, so now that that is set up, let's go ahead and pull out our trigger, which we'll just use this same trigger, Control-D, and slide that over. Good enough. Call this the rotating door trigger. You'll notice that this is upset because the previous one doesn't exist. I think. Remove script. Let's attach the script. Door trigger. Now we're talking. And then we just need to reference the rotating door open reference and the rotating door itself. There we go. Everything else here is good to go. This trigger did break, so let's quickly fix it by removing the script. This is because I renamed the script middle of the way through. And it looks like sliding door stayed reference, but open reference changed name, so we lost the reference. We just need to re-drag that in. And now, when we jump into preview mode, we should be able to see all of this running correctly. Clear preview, walking in, sliding door. Yo ho, yo ho. That did not work. Let's see what I do wrong. That's the sliding door. Oh, I forgot to check the Boolean. So this is sliding. We need to check it to turn it off to make it rotate. Duh. Easy mistake, my bad. Preview mode, walking in, sliding door, rotating door. Nice. All right, there we go. Very good. Oh, it pushes you. Okay, there is a way to fix that. You can either have the trigger really big, or you can turn collidable off while it's opening. So during that 1 second opening, you can say collidable is set to false, and then after 1 second, so using set timeout, you can set it back to collidable. That's typically how I approach it. So, unfortunately, I've got to run to a meeting that I'm now late for. My bad. But hopefully, that gives you a great introduction. So the challenges there would be like that collidable thing I just mentioned, making it non-collidable while it's opening for 1 second, and then after set timeout, setting it back to collidable. And the last bit there is like using the key, and I think that's where we're going to end. Okay, I will catch you in the next one. Bye!